All right, Baruch Hashem. Okay, we begin our discussion today of Parsha Toldot 5784. The quick summary of the Parsha. There's a Parsha in a nutshell. Of course, last week's Parsha, Yitzchak marries Rivka. We find out this week's Parsha that Rivka is barren. She's not able to have children. They pray. She has children. She is, in fact, pregnant, not with just one child, but in fact, with two twins. One is going to eventually be Yaakov, the continuing progenitor of the Jewish people. The other one is going to be Eisav. We'll speak quite a bit about that in moments. And she and her husband and the children, they have to move because of famine to another part of Israel called Gerar, and there she's taken. And but she is unharmed and untouched, as again Yitzchak's prayers protect her, and she's able to go safely back home. And they're told, because of this situation, because of what the king almost did with her, they're kicked out politely, and they're told that they should stay away. And anyway, Yitzchak is becoming super successful, and the people around him are getting jealous. They're stuffing up his wells, and it's an untenable situation. Eventually, they make a peace treaty, which I think we've spoken about in previous years. And the Torah shifts from the story about Yitzchak and the wells and everything else to focusing on his actual Toldot, on Yaakov and Eisav, the famous story of Eisav selling the firstborn rights, whatever that means. We'll discuss that a little bit today, God willing. And then later on, as they grow up, Yaakov, in disguise, as Eisav receives Esav's blessings from their father Yaakov, because of his mother's Rivka's insistence on doing that. And we will see a little bit, God willing. We'll get a chance to explore some of the psukim and specific verses that teach us some, I think, valuable lessons. We might not be able to. I was a little optimistic when I sent out the email yesterday with the source sheet and the questions, the 8 questions we're going to cover. I'm not sure how much time we'll have to actually cover the questions in as great as depth as I would have liked, but we'll at least get the conversation started, God willing, at least. So let's without any further ado, let's get right into the verses. So we're going to start towards the beginning. It says chapter 25, verse 22. The verse says, so the children, the sons, were fighting inside the womb. But Tomar and Rivka said, Im Kain, if this is so, lama anochi, what am I? What is this? Why do I need this? But et Hashem. She didn't understand what was going on, so she went to go and inquire of Hashem. How did she inquire of Hashem? Good question. Hopefully we'll see some answers about that soon. So it says, Rashi tells us about this fighting. It says, Rabbeinu dershuhu lashon ritza. There is a language of running, of wanting. Keshayahu veret al pitche Torah shel Shem, which would go to the entrance of the yeshiva of Shem ve'ever. Yaakov ran. Umefar case, let's say he wanted to leave. Overet al petach avodat elilim, when she went to the entrance of a house of idol worship. Eisav mafar case, let's say Eisav wanted to leave. So it seems that they both wanted to get out at these different times, and it's an interesting and we've mentioned this Rashi before. It's definitely, obviously, going to be very different people. If one wants to leave to go to get out of the womb to go to yeshiva, and the other one wants to run and do avodah zarah. So obviously, these are going to be very different children. No wonder they were fighting, and no wonder it was difficult. It was a difficult pregnancy. So, with that said, we need to answer a few questions. However, one is, what exactly does it mean to want to leave to go to a yeshiva? In other words, we are under the presumption, many of us, that when we were in the womb, we were learning Torah from an angel. What does it mean to want to leave that because you're walking by yeshiva? You want to go to the yeshiva instead. What benefit is there to being in a yeshiva versus learning inside the womb with an angel? So this is a question that was addressed once, at least once, to the Khatam Sofer. The Sefer by Rabbi Yisrael Yosef Brunstein, called V'karata l'Shabbat Oneg, brings up Medua. Why did he want to leave? Sha'al Hagon Rabbi Moshe Sofer, Baal Khatam Sofer, the author of the Khatam Sofer, was asked, why would Yaakov want to leave? Kasher Avra Rivka Panei Beit HaMikdash, because Yaakov said, why did Yaakov want to leave when he was by a yeshiva? Limdu Otanu Chazal, Rabbi told us in the Gemara in Masechet Nida. There's Gemara Nida, page 30. When a child is found in the womb of his mother, Ba Malach, an angel comes, teaching him the entire Torah. Not only that, but the Gemara goes on to say that it's a wonderful time. It's what we wish for. Throughout life, we want to get back into that sort of situation where that angel is teaching us Torah in the comforts of the safety of the womb. So that's what's happening to Yaakov. Why does he want to leave? Yaakov chashav shebeit hamidrash yelamed yoter ma'asher b'pnei malach. Does he think he's going to learn more in a beit midrash versus what he's learning from an angel? So hatshuva and the answer is hashiv hachatam sofer. This is the famous answer given by the Chatam Sofer. Yaakov Avinu amnam lama Torah mipi hamalach. He knew he was learning Torah. He believed he knew he was learning Torah from an angel. Ulam limud zeh haya b'mechitzat Eisav harasha. Yes, sure, his teacher is the best teacher. Yes, sure, the yeshiva is the best yeshiva. But he's sitting right next to Eisav. The classmate is the problem here. Mishum kach adif Yaakov et halimud b'beit hamikdash al pnei halimud b'pnei hamalach. And that, in and of itself, writes the karata l'Shabbat Oneg, that in and of itself is a good enough reason to want to leave the womb and learn in a yeshiva, so that you're not learning next to a terrible potential influence like Eisav. Medivrei Chatam Sofer ha'ela anu lamdim. We learn, Amar Chafetz Chaim. By the way, he quotes Chafetz Chaim. Says, Kama aleinu lehitrachek mechavera. How much we should distance ourselves from an evil friend. It's very important. Influences are important. We know, those of us who've studied sociology, we know there are certain influences a person has, be it parents, society, peers. One of the most important, and we see this very much today, I don't think I need to go into detail. A lot of our opinions are based on the thoughts and ideas that we learn from peers. Especially the young people nowadays, we're learning almost everything they know is not from official sources, but on YouTube and TikTok or whatever else. So it's important to know who your influencer is. And Yaakov decided that going to going to a yeshiva is important, of course, but it's more important to go to yeshiva where the influence is not going to be someone like Eisav Harasha. So that's the idea. Okay. So the very next verse, Rivka receives comfort. Oh. I might as well say this. I don't have this in the sheet, but it's worth saying. It's a beautiful thought from the Katav Sofer, the son of the Khatam Sofer. So we just had the Khatam Sofer. We're gonna have another Khatam Sofer later on, quoting one of his Rebbeim, probably his most important Rebbe, but most influential Rebbe, I should say. But we'll also quote right now the Katav Sofer. I don't have the source in front of me right now, but I'll try to say it out. So there's a Gemara Nedarim 62 that says that learning Torah for the wrong reasons is a terrible thing. And the Katav Sofer uses that Gemara to explain this also. Yes, indeed, Yaakov wanted to leave the womb to get to a yeshiva to learn. But why did he want to go learn? Could it be, possibly, you don't know Yaakov yet, could it be that he wanted to learn but for his own glory, for his own kavod, for his own wealth, whatever people think is going to happen when you learn Torah? If you're learning Torah for the wrong reasons, bad things can happen, as we just said from the Gemara. And maybe that's another reason for Rivka to be concerned. So that's why she was so nervous, and that's why she went to go lidrosh et H-Shem. She went to go ask a question of Hashem. The Gemara and elsewhere says that she went to go ask Eli, the not Eli, sorry, to go and ask Shem what's going on, and he answered her. He says, "Vayomer Hashem lo." Hashem said to her through this message, "Shnei goyim b'vitneich." You have two nations in your womb. Shnei lu'amim b'may'ayich. They're gonna grow up. Yipredu om mil'om yematz v'rav yavod tzayir. So they're gonna you're going to give birth to two people, two different nations. One is going to be greater than the other, and the other one's the older one is going to serve the younger eventually. In other words, the older, being Eisav, is going to serve Yaakov. In other words, at some point in history, whatever this means, the nations of Europe are somehow going to serve the nation of Israel. And when I say nation of Israel, I don't just mean the states. Okay. Says Rashi, Al Yidei Shliach, she heard this, she didn't hear from Hashem, she heard it through a messenger, as we said before. Shnei goyim b'vitnech. So game ktiv. It says game, by the way, does not mean goyim, does not mean nations. Game means like the great ones. So it says great ones are going to come from you. That's what it says in the words, and then the reading, the kri and ktiv is different. It's spelled Geim, Gimel Yud, and Mem, and Goyim is Gimel Vav Yud Mem. So one of the Yuds is read like a Vav in public readings. And Elo Antoninus v'Rebbe. The examples of this are Antoninus and Rebbe. The Gemara in Avodah Zarah that Rashi is quoting here says that there were two great people at a particular time in history. There was the Roman Emperor Antoninus, I believe Marcus Antony, and at the same time it was his friend and study buddy Rebbe, the author of eventually the author of the Mishnah, Rav Yehuda Hanasi. V'lo pasku me'al shulchanam lo tzno v'lo chazeret lo bimim hachama, lo bimot hachama, lo bimot hagisham. Whether it was winter, whether it was summer, they always had all the fruits all year round on their table, meaning they always, not just fruits and vegetables as well, they always had, in other words, they had such opulence that they were able to afford things even out of season, which is considered a big deal, especially back then. And they're going to be great. They're going to be kingdoms. She will have great people coming from her on both sides of the aisle, right? On the Jewish side and on the non-Jewish side, there's going to be great people, sometimes even at the same time in history, right? You'll have Antoninus and Rebbe, and perhaps later on in history, there's, I don't know, the Vilna Gaon and Thomas Jefferson lived at the same time, so you could have great Jews and non-Jews living at the same time. And so that's the answer that she's given. Why does that comfort her? In other words, she feels a lot of pain. There's a struggle going on within her, and okay. They're struggling within her. She's in a lot of pain. A lot of things are going on. So why is this idea that she's going to have two great nations coming from her? Why is that a source of comfort? And the last thing that Rashi says here is v'lo yishavu b'gedula. They're not going to be equal in greatness. Kishazeh kam zeh nofal. When one rises, one will fall. V'chein hu amar be'ilmala charava. Quotes a verse in Yishmael, and he concludes, "Lo nitmale tzur ele mechurbana shel Yerushalayim." Tzur, in other words, Rome will not rise, will not be great until unless the Yerushalayim is destroyed. Okay. All right. Writes the Rav, the Brisker Rav in Chedushay Hagriz is where it's printed by his students and family. So he asks, how is it that that's a comfort for her? So now why do I need this? Well, that's an interesting question also. What does she mean by why do I need this? What, like, lama zeh anochi, why is this for me? V'hanira dehine ita b'bracha. So there's a Gemara in Bracha that says Shenamar b'yamim hahem Hiskiyahu was going to die. He felt he was sick. He was dying, and Yeshayahu told him it's because he's not having children. And he said, "But I have a prophecy that my child is going to be terrible, and I don't want to have a child if my child is going to be such a terrible person." And Yeshayahu says to him, "It's all good and well that you have prophecy. And you might be right that your son is not going to be righteous, but you have a duty, you have a job, you have a mitzvah of prurvu, and your mitzvah is to have the child, raise the child, do your best. And he turns out to be a bad kid, bad person. That's not on you. That's what something else. Maybe your prophecy will be true, but you need to fulfill your job and ignore your prophecy." If only somebody would have said that to Macbeth, right? So here we go. Here we have a woman who's wondering, why do I need this kind of suffering? Lama ze anochi. What do I need this for? I don't have a mitzvah of pruvu. Women, according to most opinions, do not have the mitzvah of pruvu. They have there's another mitzvah not pruvu, but to have a mitzvah to populate the world, perhaps, according to some. There's not the time for that halachic discussion. Yishlom Mishum Dechaze Li Ruach HaKodesh Nafka Minei Binyan Delo Mali. So she has through Ruach HaKodesh or whatever, through this messenger, she found out from Hashem that's not going to go well. Let's just skip towards the end. He says, "V'zehu abir kan dechine pish Rashi al shi rotzatu haita overet al pitche Torah." So this is why one was running to one kind of avodah zarah, one was running to the Torah. Right? So how is she going to know? Why should she be doing this? Via Isha. Hello, inena mitzvah al pri. She has no real mitzvah for pri. Al kain amra. That's why she said, Im kain lama ze anochi. Why do I need this for? What do I need this for? The im haita mitzvah lo haita omeret klum. If this would have been a mitzvah, I wouldn't have said anything. Why would I complain? I'm doing a mitzvah. But why am I having this runaround? Why am I having all this pain when it's not leading to any kind of positive tachlis? I'm not going to get a mitzvah for this. Ach mechavin she'enu mitzvah im yatsa rasha v'gam she'itza gam tzadik hana lama ze enochi. That's why she asks, "What do I need this for?" And that's the explanation. That's the Griza's explanation. Of course, if you've been following along, that wasn't the question we asked, though. All right, we asked, how is it that this comforted her, that these great people are going to come from her? And the answer is both, following what Rashi said, both are going to come out of her, and she will have a rasha, but they will also have good coming from them, both. Yes, she's not fulfilling a mitzvah of pruvu, but she's not just suffering for the short term. Oh, she's going to have 2 kids. One of them is going to be not such a great kid. So why is she suffering? Whatever her suffering is now will have antecedents later on. Will give birth to greatness in the future. There will be an Antoninus and a Rebbe, great people. There'll be a Thomas Jefferson sometime in the future. There's not the greatest tzaddik either, whatever. That wasn't my point. There's going to be an Abraham Lincoln. There's going to be righteous people who saved the Jews against the Nazis, right? There's going to be righteous amongst the nations who stand up against tyranny and against bad things. And so there you have it. So that is a great comfort. So yes, maybe in the short term this will come of nothing. No positive mitzvah is gained, no pruvu. But in the end, a lot of other mitzvot are going to be done because of these people. Some great people will come from both sides and do some great things, and that's the reason why there's a sort of a comfort, and why she begins to understand what it is that she's accomplishing here, which leads her later on in the parsha to be the initiator of the entire trick to get the bracha from Yaakov to Yitzchak, from Yitzchak to Yaakov. I'm sorry. All right, let's skip a little bit to the next chapter 25, verses 30 and 32. And 30, 31, 32, and 33. All 4 of those verses are kind of important to understand the context for this story that we've seen before, but is not well understood. So Eisav comes in from the field, right? He's tired, he's hungry. Eisav el Yaakov, and he sees Yaakov is cooking up a soup. And he says to Yaakov, Haliteni na min ha'adom hazeh. Give from me from this red stuff to eat. Ki ayef anochi alkin kara shemo Edom. And because I'm hungry, and therefore it's Kara, whoever that is, so whether they called him or he called himself Edom from that point on. Red, right? Because he is focused on the red, he's focused on the physical, he's focused on getting that stuff in his mouth, and without any context of why is my brother cooking the soup all of a sudden, none of that occurred to him. And what the Midrash says about how this is the day that Avraham died, that didn't concern him. All right. Anyway, Vayomer Yaakov Michra Kayom et Bechorot Chali. Sell to me like this day, like today, whatever that means, the Bechorah. Vayomer Eisav, and Eisav says to him, Hine Anochi Holech Lamut. I'm going to die. I'm walking towards my death. Olama Zeh Li Bechorah, and what do I need the Bechorah for? To what purpose is this firstborn right? I'm going to die. I'm not going to get anything out of this. He didn't learn his mother's lesson. We're not looking at the short term. So, Vayomer Yaakov says to him, Hishava Li, Kayom, Hishava Lo, and he swore to him, V'yimkor et Bechorato leYaakov, and he sold his Bechorah to Yaakov. There are a lot of questions we could ask on this, but one is a halachic point. The Ktsot HaChoshen writes about, well, basically all of Choshen Mishpat, so all of tort law and property rights and such. And the Gemara, he quotes a Gemara in a lot of places. Gittin Yudalit is one of the places where the Gemara talks about a davar she'ein bo le'olam, a thing that does not exist in the world. Right? If I come up to you and say, I want to sell you my pearl-handled knife. You say, wow, pearl-handled. I would love one of those. Pay for it. How much is it? And I give you a price, and you give me the money. That sale is an illegal sale. And you can get your money back 100%. Why? Because assuming I don't have a pearl-handled knife, I just came up with such a thing. I don't actually have one in my possession. Don't know where I can get one. Can't find it on Amazon or whatever. So in that case, the sale is void because it's a thing that she'ein bo le'olam. It does not exist. It's not in the world. You can't do business with things that aren't in the world. And if you have to, there are situations, stocks, bonds, etc., where in a sense they are dealing with things that aren't real. They're not in the real world. There's only like the potential for them. Not just stocks, but also what's the exchange in Chicago called? Well, you get the idea. It's a thing that doesn't exist. So how is he able to sell it? Is the question. So the Choshen gives a few answers, but the Rivash says an interesting thing. The Rivash says that it's true that nowadays such a sale would not be a good sale, but that's because we're living in a different world than they did. We live in a world that's after Matan Torah, after the giving of the Torah. If we would live then, it would be different, right? Before the giving of the Torah, you could sell. You could make promises on things that aren't in actual existence. You could add, perhaps, I don't know if anybody says this. I just thought of it myself, so again, take it for what it's worth. It could be that works because it's in the Torah. In other words, right? If because the Torah says that there's such a thing as a promise, there's such a thing as this Bechorah that Eisav has. That's why he was able to sell it, because the Torah will say that it exists. I don't know. So it's a little bit 3D, 4D chess here to answer that. But that's I just wanted to bring up the idea, just something to think about, that we have these laws and we have the idea anyway that our forefathers kept these laws, or at least, especially with property laws, we have to consider that they make sense, they're logical, so they would have been kept even without having to be written down in the Shulchan Aruch or something like that. Okay. We're going to skip to the beginning of the next chapter, chapter 26, verse 1. As we said, there was a famine in the land. Vayhi rav ba'aretz milvad harav harishon. Aside from the famine that was earlier, assuming we're talking about the earlier famine that we talked about with regard to the famine that happened in the time of Avraham. And so the question becomes then, what can we compare about these different famines? Why are we mentioning the famine that happened with Avraham, that he had to travel around, and now the same thing is happening with Yitzchak? What is this trying to tell us? So the Malbim has, the way he writes his commentary brilliantly, is he has questions and he has series of answers to those questions. And in this particular verse, he's wondering the same thing we just mentioned. Lama hishiru meridat Mitzrayim v'lo hishir kein Avraham lama kafal shekein haaretz gur ba'aretz hiskir shnei pamim mitanat haaretz. He has a number of questions, but the first question he asked that we sort of skipped, what's the comparison milvad harav harishon, besides that first famine? So, in answering that question, it says, "Hine imasha Avraham hutzrach letzeit leMitzrayim mipnei harav lo ifli Hashem chasdo imado." It seems like Hashem wasn't showing him his chesed. Obviously, Hashem is kulo chesed. Hashem is completely righteous. So why did he treat Avraham so much rougher than he's treating Yitzchak here? So he says, Yesh bezeh kama tamim. There are a number of reasons for this. 3 to be exact. That's the number. Number 1, he says, and we'll just say this out, and you can, when you get a chance, you can look at it on your own. He says, first of all, you have to understand that the famine that came in the time of Avraham was one of his 10 tests. The Mishnah in Pirkei Avot tells us that Asar Nisyonot, there are 10 tests that were given to Avraham, and although there's not consensus about what those 10 tests were exactly, if you go through the Torah, you'll find something like, I think I did the math once, something like 25 or so, 24 different tests. How you narrow it down to 10, whether you leave out the midrashim like some people do, or whether you leave them in and take out the similar ones, whatever it is. Right. So first of all, you have to know that the first famine that was mentioned, Hashem couldn't just chick-chack and let it go, because it was part of Avraham's test to survive it. He goes on to say, why did he need to be tested at all? This is a great and very important question. It's really a commentary on Pirkei Avot in a sense. Why did Avraham need to be tested at all? It's because Avraham, as opposed to everyone else that we know about in all of Tanakh, Avraham came to Hashem through logic, through dat. And when you have dat, and that's the reason you're going to fulfill Hashem's will, that is not enough for Hashem. Hashem wants your faith. Hashem wants you to be a person of faith. So he's going to test you to make sure for you to narrow your thinking into a different kind of formulation, into a way of thinking of Hashem in terms of believing in him. Not so much mental, but more emotional as well. So when you have that, that's when Hashem doesn't need to test you anymore. So that's the first answer why Abraham's famine was worse than Yitzchak. Number 2, and this is kind of similar. but he was not on the level of receiving obvious miracles yet. The miracles that he sees obviously in front of him, that doesn't happen until later on in his life, after the Brit Bein HaBetarim, the covenant between the parts. Until the covenant between the parts, all of Avraham's miracles were, let's call it, natural miracles. Not so obvious that there's a H-Shem miracle. The kind of miracles that we go through every single day and don't really think about. And so, that's normal. That's just part of nature. It's okay for my eyes to work the way they do. That's totally normal. It's totally normal that gravity's keeping us on this planet. It's totally normal that we're revolving around the sun. So those are all miracles. We don't recognize them as miracles, but that's on us. So that's how Avraham, when he had his original miracles, before Brit Bein HaBetarim, they were normal, everyday, natural miracles, quote unquote. It became unnatural only after that particular Brit. And that didn't happen until after the fast. And the third answer is related, and that is that it was a normal, natural phenomenon for his time. Now, keep in mind, maybe we think we do, but we don't really know what weather patterns and what climatic changes there were between us and Avraham. We don't know all of that. But what we do know is that nature was different back then than it is today. Animals were different. People were more mature, amongst other examples. And so that's something to factor in. That maybe what Avraham experienced was a natural phenomenon for his day. Okay. Let's keep going. Chapter 26, verse 5. Is already telling us what part of the context was of Abraham's Hashem's blessing to Yitzchak. He says, "Why am I blessing you?" And universally, every single first conversation that Hashem has with the Avot of the forefathers is a promise to give them the land of Israel. In this particular case, he says, "I am giving this to you." Why? Ekev asher shama Avraham b'koli. I'm giving this to you because Hashem is saying, Avraham, listen to my voice. V'yishmor mishmarti, and he guarded whatever needed to be guarded. Mishmarti, mitzvotai, fukotai, v'torotai, and these different categories of commandments and laws. That's what the next commentary from Rashi tells us, and we learned this Rashi in previous years, so we're not going to dwell on it too much. But basically, this includes the positive commandments, the negative commandments, the rabbinic laws, including things like Eruv the idea that the Avraham kept Tchum Shabbat, that he wouldn't travel past 2,000 Amod after the last house. So all of that was included in this in these mitzvot that he kept. Comes along the Ramban, says Rashi, that's very pretty, that's very cute, but we've got a problem. The problem is Avraham and his descendants didn't always listen to Hashem. We know that Yaakov is going to marry Leah and Rachel, who are sisters, and we're not allowed to marry sisters. The Jewish people will sometimes make mistakes. The Avot, even themselves, are not perfect. And so therefore, what are you talking about? That Avraham kept all of my mitzvot, and that's why I'm giving you the land, so you will also be like that. We weren't like that. And anyway, bigger question. Where did Avraham learn these laws from? These rabbinic laws that he kept. How did he figure them out? From logic? From other cultures? So the Ramban says that this idea that the Avot kept the mitzvot is an idea from the Gemara, from the Midrash. It's a legitimate idea. However, why were there violations? The violations are all done, says Ramban, and this fits with a lot of other things he writes. All of the violations happen because they were outside of Eretz Yisrael. In other words, not because they were compelled by being outside of Eretz Yisrael to do bad things, but because they don't have to keep the mitzvot outside of Eretz Yisrael. The Ramban says, and this is hard to understand and perhaps controversial to say, but the Ramban says keeping the mitzvot outside of Eretz Yisrael is just kind of like playing pretend. Really, only in Eretz Yisrael do you have to keep the mitzvot. That's what makes Eretz Yisrael a holy land, and that's an important idea he has, like I said, throughout most of his commentary. And here's no exception to that here. Writes Rav Shalom Bravda Shalom Volbe, my Rebbe's Rebbe. Based on this Rashi and this Ramban that we saw, he writes, Mehechan, he quotes a Midrash Tanchum, it says, Mehechan Lamad Avraham at the Torah. Where did Avraham learn the Torah? Me'atzmo Lamed. He learned it from himself. He knew it intuitively. Is it possible that somebody could learn the entire Torah by themselves? That he had, Ramban says, he had Ruach HaKodesh, he had an internal voice of some sort that gave him power to do this. Right. If Adam haya magiya la'atzmo hu haya omed brit hakodesh, he ha'atzmo hamiti shel ha'adam. So this Torah, this wisdom of the Torah and the holiness of the Torah, all somehow can come from within. So he continues, and this is probably the most vital part. We really believe this very much. We make a huge mistake in thinking that I want something. I want to do something wrong. I want to eat something not kosher. That's not you. You are connected to Hashem. You have an neshama inside you. That's your ani. That's your you. The ani that we say wants a slice of not kosher food, that's actually Yetzer Hara. That's really outside of you. It should be outside of you. Visualize it as outside of you. That inner voice inside of you that's telling you to do the wrong thing, that's the Yetzer Hara. And that's not you. The real you wants to do only good and connect with Hashem, and together with everything, with everybody else, should be witness to the Shekhinah. That's the goal. All right, we have a few more minutes. I think we can try to finish off some other ideas. Let's just skip to chapter 27, verse 22. No, we're going to skip to 27, verse 30 and 30 through 31. So he goes in, he sneaks in. He has like his father's blind-ish, and he's wearing this woolen outfit, So he feels him and thinks it's Eisav. He gives him Eisav's blessing. Yaakov leaves. Vahi kasher kila. So not Yaakov leaves. Yitzchak. Yeah. Yaakov leaves. Vahi kasher kila Yitzchak levarech et Yaakov. When Yitzchak was done blessing Yaakov, vahi ach yatso Yaakov me'et penei Yitzchak. Yaakov leaves from before Yitzchak. Aviv v'asu achiv ba mitzido. So so he comes in straight away. He comes in from hunting. V'yas gam hu matamim, and he also brought food for his father to eat, as his father sent him out to go get food. V'yavei la'aviv v'yomer la'aviv yakum avi, get up, my father. V'ochal mitzeid beno ba'avur tibarchani nafshecha. Eat my food so you can bless me. The Khatam Sofer, again, we said we're going to quote him again. So here he is again, quoting his Rebbe, Rav Natan Adler. A very important, interesting character in history, sort of kicked around from place to place. And a lot of the time that he was traveling, being, by the way, kicked around by Jewish communities for his controversial ideas and such. He traveled often with the Khatam Sofer. So here's a quote from him. He says, look at how he's speaking to him. When Yaakov spoke to him, when Yaakov spoke to his father Yitzchak, Kum, please get up, Kederech, Shebnei Yisrael medabrim al avotehem. Aval Eisav haya medaber im aviv beloshon hester. He spoke to him in an unkindly way, in a sort of hidden, unclear way. Okay, how so? Yakum avi kederech shenicharim hanachrim. Yeah, medabrim. He spoke to his father in a sort of separated way. Now, I know this is a normal thing to do in certain communities anyway, to speak in the third person to somebody you respect. But here we're talking about a father, right? And to a father, you speak the same way that you would speak to somebody you respect, but there's a chiba, there's a love, there's a different kind of relationship. It's not just like, yes, sir, right? We're talking about there's a love relationship. And so there should be more krivut, there should be more unity and less of a separation between the father and the son. So when Eisav says, sorry, give me a moment. I'm sorry. Okay, we're back. So when Eisav says, it says Yakum Avi, my father, get up, right? Instead of Kum, right? It's more of a separation between him and his father, and that just shows how he doesn't really care for him as much as he should. All right, and not last. So it's interesting, and again, this is nowhere near a full class on this as it maybe should be, but there's a Gemara in Nedarim 31a that talks about whether Yishmael and whether or not Eisav are considered Jewish or not. So the Gemara says, where's the Gemara? Why isn't that? I don't have the Hebrew here. Interesting. So the Gemara there at the bottom here of this quote says, but isn't there Eisav, who's considered a descendant of Yitzchak? So the Gemara says, and by the way, there's differences of opinion of how to even read this Gemara, whether we're talking about Eisav or the children of Eisav. It's going to be relevant for the next part. But either way, they're different from Yishmael. The Pachad Yitzchak, Rav Yitzchak Hutner, brings this Gemara in one of the Ma'amar, one of the essays he has on Sukkot, and he writes there that let's just skip to the bottom here. He basically says that Eisav is different from Yishmael. That at least his descendants are. How are they different? Because the people of the children of Eisav, that is the Christian world, accepts the not the oral law, but accepts the written Torah. They took the written Torah. They consider it their own. It has the New Testament. So they at least agree with us on that. Whereas Yishmael, although they respect the Old Testament, they respect the New Testament, Moshe to them is just another one of the prophets, one of many, maybe even a great one, but nevertheless doesn't matter because he's just a prophet, and this other separate, really foreign to the Torah book called the Quran, it for the Muslims supersedes it, which creates a bigger distance between us and them versus us and the Christian world. For whatever differences there are between us and the Christian world, and there are plenty, the fact remains that at least they have one thing connected to us, which is probably what makes them so similar looking to us. I'm not talking about physically. I'm talking about in terms of their religious behavior, at least what it used to be when they're a little more modest about it. Certainly the Christian world, the world of Eisav, is for sure more connected to us than the world of Yishmael, according to the Pachad Yitzchak. Now, again, I said there's a lot to say about this. Not everybody agrees, obviously. This definitely flies in the face of something written by the Rambam, who writes almost the exact opposite. But it's Tzarech Ian. We'll hopefully discuss it in other times. That is one of the things that I knew we wouldn't have time to do, but I just wanted to bring it up, put it out there on the table for you to look at and think about for later. Is Eisav considered Jewish, though? He got the blessings, etc. Are his descendants part of the Jewish people? We could even ask. So, to complicate the issue, there's a Gemara at the beginning of Kiddushin, top of the page of Yud Chet 18, says, Rav Chia bar Avin Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Nachri Yoresh et Aviv, Davar Torah. The Torah says that a non-Jew inherits from his father. So in other words, Jewish law recognizes the inheritance of a non-Jewish father to his non-Jewish son. Diktiv. The proof for this is a verse in not in our parsha, but it's definitely quoted in the Mefarshim on our parsha. Ki Yarusha le'Eisav natati et har Seir. The mountain of Seir was given as a Yerusha to Eisav. V'dilma Yisrael mu'umar shani. Maybe it's different there because Eisav isn't not Jewish. He's Jewish, but a mumar. In other words, he's a rebellious Jew. He's a, what do they call it? A lapsed Jew. God forbid, lapsed. Ele kahacha. So they're going back and forth. That's the point I wanted to bring up from this Gemara. Now, it happens to be, as I said before, that there's an argument between Rashi and others, whether we're talking about Eisav proper or Eisav's children, Eisav's descendants. Who got Har Seir? Was it Eisav, the man, or Eisav, the ancestor? In other words, everybody got it. Everybody descendant of Eisav has Har Seir. That's the place where they have. That's where they live. So amongst other commentators, we've got the Rashash, who has a solution to our problem. Our problem is, are we saying that Eisav is a Jewish mumar, a Jewish rebellious Jew, or that his descendants are? Who would have thought that Eisav's descendants are Jewish? How could that possibly be a reality? So it says Rashash on his commentary on the Gemara in Kedushin, and take this for what it's worth. He says, Kamash Milan Harehu Lokech Nashim Benot Canaan. He married women from Benot Canaan. He married Yishmael's daughter. How are his children going to be Jewish? Hai Milan, the Vlada Kimave, Eina Benoli Rusha. So he should not have to, and his children should not be able to inherit from him. V'yishlomar devadai girin kodem shinasen. He made them become giorot. He converted them. He's living in his father's house still when he's marrying these women. And as sad as these women make their parents, and according to Rashi, the smoke from their avodah zara reaches into their eyes, etc. Who knows, right? God forbid we should know such things. But so it says, "Shenasan ki hara ali." Mipi Yitzchak Aviv. So he tried to at least appear to be a good person, at least in his father's eyes, and therefore he converted these women before he married them, so that when he's living in his father's house, at least they'll think that the children are, that these daughters are Jewish, and then his children are then, by the way, Jewish, and then therefore they who inherited Har Seir, they're inheriting it as Jews. Yes, indeed. Mumar, yeah, they're rebellious, they are lapsed, etc., etc. But according al pi halacha, at least according to the Rashash, Esav's children are as Jewish as Eisav was. That means he's as Jewish as Yitzchak was, and so for all that time, they're Jewish and Jewish and Jewish all the way down the line. I don't know what he would say about what. There must have been a switch, though, at the time of Matan Torah, when the Jews received the Torah. That's when it became a nation, and obviously Esav's descendants were not part of that. In fact, Esav's descendant Amalek attacked the Jews right before that, so they're not. Certainly, from that point on, they are no longer considered Jewish, and they lose that right. But nevertheless, they still did inherit this land and of Har Seir, and that is what belongs to them. No question about that. So I hope at least this gave you some ideas to think about in terms of our relationship with Eisav and Yishmael. Certainly, our relationship with prayer and some of the other topics we discussed today. Definitely, definitely, we're thinking about how we can, in the future, how we can connect more to the world of Avraham and become the great people that we're supposed to become, even though we don't have the test that Hashem gave Avraham to test his faith when he became a believer in God through logic. We need to also be believers in God through our emotions, and hopefully that in and of itself will save us from some of the tests that we don't want in our lives. All right. We should have a good rest of your week, and Shabbat Shalom. I'm going to pause the sharing to Facebook. If you have any questions, ask now, or feel free to ask on the YouTube comments.